And tonight on the Daily Wrap, new revelations that the Obama administration had secretly expanded another NSA program. The details straight ahead. Rick Perry becomes the 10th Republican to jump into the race for the White House. Is this a second chance to make a first impression? And a shocking new poll out tonight says 7 in 10 Democrats say Hillary winning the nomination ain't no sure thing. 7 in 10. We discuss all of that, plus potluck and yay and nay. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, along with my co-host. He is a Sirius XM radio host and senior political columnist for Forbes. He is Rick Under.
Good evening.
Good evening,
to
sir.
One and all.
And to his right, assistant online editor for Commentary Magazine, Noah Rothman in the Heather Hansen seat.
Thank you very much.
Wearing it well. And finally, he is the editor of thewisdomdaily.com, and you're not. Rabbi Brad Hirschfield is here.
Good to be here.
SNL Steel. All right, it's time for the Daily Download. And just as the NSA begins to wind down the bulk collection of Americans' phone records, there is a new report out tonight that the Obama administration secretly expanded another NSA program. According to the New York Times, documents leaked by Edward Snowden show the Justice Department gave the NSA the okay to monitor Americans' international internet traffic. It was all a part of an effort to catch overseas hackers. The agency was permitted to monitor only addresses and cyber signatures that could be tied to foreign governments. But the documents also indicate that the NSA was looking to target hackers even in cases it could not establish links to foreign powers. The Obama administration is defending the surveillance, saying it's a matter of protecting Americans from the activities of foreign governments. But critics charge that the issue is not clear-cut and should be subject to public debate. Is this something that we should have debated, Mr. Rothman?
Oh, we're debating it now.
Good point.
No, I certainly think that it's not out of the realm of reasonableness to want to have a public debate about these sort of issues, but also that when we're talking about anti-espionage, which is what this is. If we're talking about foreign governments, we're talking about anti-espionage. And in order for us to have a public debate about that, you really neutralize the capability to monitor individuals who would be subject to that sort of monitoring and who we're trying to catch. So it's sort of a self-defeating process. We can have that discussion now because we're pretty much sure that whatever capabilities we're talking about are no longer the primary capabilities that we're going to be using to catch individuals who might be a problem.
Rick, on your radio show, you say that this is a very hot topic, that this is something that Americans, maybe I give more credit for caring about. Well, what do people like to talk about most when it comes to these sort of stories?
People are understandably very concerned about their rights. They struggle with the question of how much should be sacrificed in the name of security versus how important it is to hang on to what is given us in the Constitution. Look, you know, the best argument I always hear is, what are we fighting for? What we really want to defend are the rights that we have as Americans, which are special. If we are willing to trade those off in response to somebody who wants to come and take them from us, well, we've kind of, as the saying goes, the terrorists win. We've given up those rights. Now, obviously, you can go too far in either direction. So at the end of the day, this is all about the balancing act. Where government can help is to be a little bit more transparent. Look, if this operation they're running is really all about people who are trying to break into our computers, I probably am not troubled by that. I want them to catch people who are doing that. But if they're collecting other data as part of it, and they're logging it, if they're cataloging it, if they're using it in other ways, then we should be concerned.
Now, Brad, you're the long-lost evil brother of Saul from Homeland, of course, Mr. Mandy, right? I can never pronounce his last name.
Patinkin.
Patinkin. Thank
nice
you.
guy, by the way.
Nice guy.
Yeah.
And people watch shows like that, and they see the way surveillance is done there, which is completely outside the law in most cases, particularly when Kerry's involved. So, all that said, I wonder if Americans are a little bit more open towards that compromise of more increased aggressive surveillance because they see what the enemy is like, even if it's fictional, and say, boy, we're up against a real monster.
So I think, like a lot of situations, people love the idea of effective, intense surveillance of other folks. And then get very nervous about themselves, which I think is incredibly naive. The way this works, and to Noah's point, you do trade out certain freedoms and certain transparency if we really are at war, which is clear that we are. And if that's going to be the case, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but let's put it in perspective. There is much more metadata gathering done in the name of commerce than the government could ever do. And I'll give you one very clear example: furniture coasters. Right? Turns out that if you know what those are and you use them, you know, the little disc that you put under the legs of your
So you
furniture
don't
so don't
scratch
scratch
your
the floor. You care about your floor, you are more likely to have a high credit rating. So it turns out that all kinds of businesses measure whether or not you have furniture coasters, because then they can circumvent the obligation to alert you that they've checked on your credit score. My point is that there are ways to get around all this, and the truth is, if we're going to worry about that, then we can come back to worrying about how other countries may be trying to destroy us. Let's put it in perspective. We don't worry about the furniture coasters and our credit scores being known. I would worry more about that, because that can't get us dead, and give greater latitude to the government, unless deep down what this really is a litmus test about whether or not you trust the government.
But we have to be a little bit careful. I agree with you guys, you know, when it comes to the Balancing Act and everything else. But this government, our government, has a history of overreacting. And all you have to do is go back to World War II and look at the Japanese internment camps to know how we are capable as a people of going too far and screwing up really badly. That shouldn't have happened. We have to be cautious, and I'm not saying it's the same thing. I can see the look on Noah's face, but it is the same when it is the same when you go too far and you're not being mindful of what you really.
What we would agree, fear is a bad place from which to make policy, but aggressiveness is not, especially if you're engaged in a battle.
Noah, last word.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to touch on a subject, I think, coming up, which is probably one of the justifications for why we have the collection of metadata, the collection of pings and bounces, and we're not really talking about anything that is an abuse of your privacy here. We're talking about individuals who might be subject to something just a little bit more intensive than monitoring their contacts with foreign governments. And there's a real reason for that, because it's not just that we're at war with a terrorist entity, but we're engaged in an espionage war, and we always have and always will be with a variety of foreign governments.
Thank you, by the way, for that segue. That was perfect. You think we were going to talk about it?
You knew it was coming.
We are going to talk about it.
We are going to talk about it.
And it's disturbing, really. News breaking now of a massive hack of possibly every federal agency. That's not confirmed, but that's what we're hearing. As many as 4 million federal employees' personal information may be in the hands of the Chinese, the Russians. Again, we don't have that confirmed, but there certainly was a massive hack, Noah, that happened.
Yeah, this is something that has been going on for the better part of, I would say, a decade, probably longer.
Why is it important?
The international environment, right, is anarchic. There is no law that governs that. There is deterrence and mutual deterrence, and that's the extent of that which governs your behavior. In the cyber field, there is no deterrence, and as a result, we've had a real hot cyber war going on throughout between allies and adversaries for the better part of, I think, a decade. And you have moments like these that kind of leak out. But there's a lot more that is just a little bit more subtle that's constantly ongoing. We are constantly under attack from Russian and Chinese sources, and I would venture that we're constantly attacking them. This is something that is just a feature, a facet of modern international diplomacy.
Brad, what do they gain? I guess it's a blackmail type of situation where now they have information on federal employees, whether it be their personal information, family information.
Again, the more data, the more ways to slice it and dice it. That's number one. Number two, that sense of vulnerability. Who hasn't had a break-in or their house vandalized? That feeling of vulnerability you can create. This is millions of people, as many as 4 million employees. So I think Noah's right. The only way to deal with this, because you can do some security measures, is to think of this like nuclear weapons and go back to the days of mutually assured destruction. The Chinese and the Russians would need to know, you crash us, you rob our citizens of their identity, the same thing will happen to you.
But the problem is, what if they can absorb that? And I think that that's a factor that they've already calculated. They can't absorb that kind of a deterrent.
And we've got to up the ante and figure out what they can't absorb, and that's got to be the response.
And we do have one more story to get to. That's meanwhile, the Pentagon is warning its anthrax scare will continue to grow. Right now, the military says it's aware of at least 51 instances where live samples of anthrax were sent to labs across the U.S. in 3 foreign countries over the past decade. That number will likely rise. Samples of the deadly virus were supposed to have been killed by radiation before shipment, but for some reason the anthrax remained alive. Pentagon officials are trying to assure the public that there's no danger.
We believe that the risk is 0 for the general public, as well as for the people who've handled this box.
Now, the story isn't exactly inspiring confidence, is it? Quickly, Brad.
No, but it's low concentration. There's anthrax in the ground, so no one should freak out right now.
Okay, we'll be talking about this, I'm sure, in the coming days and weeks. Anyway, coming up next is ISIS social media team, the most dangerous part of their organization. Stay right here.